they will compete directly against us. And I suppose we are at a very high price point currently. I think the last reported sheep price I have is $8.20 a kilo, which, and I scroll back to the figures as far back as 1995.
Hello and welcome to AgriFocus, the podcast from Agriland that takes a closer look at the issues that matter most to farmers. I'm Francess McDonnell, and today we're going to be looking at why sheep farmers in Ireland are seeing record prices for lamb at this time. And with Ramadan and Easter this month, are we likely to see more new highs? Joining me today to tell us what might be next for sheep farmers is Seamus McMenamin, Sector Manager for Sheepmeat and Livestock with Bord Bia. Seamus, you're very welcome to Agriland.
Good afternoon, Francis.
Why are lamb prices so buoyant at this time, Seamus?
Yeah, I suppose we're looking at a very tight supply situation, and that's driving these higher prices. We have Easter and Ramadan have come in very quick succession this year, and around that time there's always peak demand for lamb, obviously, and peak throughput to go along with that. If I was to look at the European markets, there's a very strong demand there for sheep meat because over the last 12 months, they killed a lot of lambs in the first half of the year. So now there's extremely tight supplies on the continent for sheep meat. So they're now looking to countries that have sheep meat. So obviously ourselves in the UK are primary exporters into the European markets, and it's driven a lot higher prices here off the back of that stronger demand.
We've been reporting here in Agriland that for quality assured spring lamb, farmers are being offered up to €9.40 a kilo. Is that roughly where we're sitting at the moment in the market?
Yeah, that's it. We're just at the very start of the spring lamb trade, and that's where they've started this year. There tends to be a bit of a premium for the spring lamb over the hoggets. Obviously, last year's lamb's coming through, and it's a very strong price for the small numbers that are starting to come forward. The hogget trade then is obviously very strong as well, and there's good demand there for lambs, particularly those that meet the spec of what the factories want, both for the domestic market and for export.
How long can we expect this trade to last? Should sheep farmers be rushing to take advantage of these prices?
Yeah, I never predict price, but I suppose we have got Easter and Ramadan coming up at the minute. I suppose indications from the factories when they're discussing with farmers is that lamb supplies are expected to remain tight more into the medium term. And I was actually talking to some colleagues over in the UK where they forecasted a 10% decline in the number of sheep that they were going to have available for processing in the first half of the year, and they actually think it might be even more of a decline than the initial forecast indicated. So I suppose all things are pointing towards a very tight enough sheep supply situation across both the UK and Ireland.
Because we had major production and cost issues last year, which really knocked back on sheep farmers. So did that impact on new numbers coming into 2024?
I suppose if we look at the last survey data available, the ewe numbers were back by 3%. Obviously, we had the census there done in December, so it'll remain to be seen if that's carried through. But that knock in confidence, I think, will have had an effect on the overall ewe flock. Like we've seen less breeding stock available last year. We've seen a very high hogget kill last year that it was reported there was an awful lot of ewe lambs processed that would have been suitable for breeding. So I do suspect we'll see a further contraction in the ewe flock in 2024 and a subsequent impact then on the number of lambs produced.
Yeah, and there was an expectation that an additional 40,000 lambs were carried into 2024 for processing as hoggets. What's the current position on that? If
I was to look at the hogget kill as it stands, we're actually on par with where we were in other years. There's been good kills in the last couple of weeks has brought us up to that level. Now that figure of 40,000 was based on a number of factors, based on production figures last year. Now I suspect there might not be as many sheep about as initially thought. We've also seen more live export of sheep to the continent as well, something that maybe hasn't been considered in the past. There's been regular loads going over to France and Spain there of sheep, so that's taken a few more out of the system as well.
Yeah, and last year there was some debate about carcass quality because of the fact that meat prices were so high, and as a result some felt that lamb were being unfinished, but we're not seeing that this year.
No, the reports in the factories have actually come back to say that the lambs are generally of very good quality and meeting spec in terms of both carcass weight and the cover on the lambs. We have seen a much milder winter as well, so lambs maybe haven't had the same sort of production difficulties. And then obviously the price of concentrates has come down a bit, so farmers are willing to put a wee bit more concentrates. And obviously then the strong prices as well encourage a farmer to meet that spec. And I suppose meeting the spec of what the factory wants does return a better price to the farmer ultimately, because it gives you gives you a lamb carcass that can fulfill both the carcass trade into Europe, the retail trade into Europe, and then the domestic demand.
So for once, farmers maybe have a little bit of bargaining power.
Yeah, and you've seen it. The prices are wherever there's negotiating power, and you've got lambs that are suitable. It definitely does give you a little bit more negotiating power. And then you've obviously then got the live trade as well to consider. You can obviously sell your lambs live as well. You have that option.
Where are you seeing the biggest demand coming from in the market?
Traditionally, we export most of our lamb into Europe. So about 3/4 of everything we export ends up in Europe. So it continues to be those 5 or 6 big European markets where most of the demand's coming from. We've got France, Germany, Sweden, Italy. There's also opportunities in Switzerland as well. In Europe, as I said earlier, there's a real shortage of lamb at the minute because they killed so many of their own lambs in the first half of the year, which left them very tight supplies currently, and that is driving that demand. And then obviously there is a bit of competitive New Zealand and Australian product that's coming into the market as well. So I suppose that's kind of keeping a cap on it. But Easter and Ramadan in close succession has sort of surpassed that.
Yeah. You were saying there about the tighter hogget supplies in mainland Europe, and of course, like the 2 religious festivals.
Yeah.
But will we see some of the plants now looking to try and get more supplies? Is that going to be the push factor here?
Yeah, they certainly they'll be looking to, with Easter and Ramadan each year. There's a peak in the throughput of the sheep to match these festivals because they're obviously lamb demand is very associated now with both the Muslim and the Christian festivals, and it does drive a demand for the product. And the EU put out their forecast for the sheep production for the whole of 2024, and is showing a very shortage in supply for the first half of 2024 in particular. And if I was to look at the overall markets, it's talking about a 5% reduction in sheep meat availability in 2024. So that's off the back of declining flocks in Europe.
Because we covered Eurostat figures recently, and we saw that EU sheep production was down 6% in 2023, and even Spain, which is the largest producer in Europe, is seeing a fall off, a decline there. So it seems to have been a general trend really across Europe.
It seems to be. I suppose you have to remember they have a very different production system than us. It's very cereal based. They've obviously, in Spain in particular, they've had issues with the weather. They also have quite a sizable milk production flock there, and there's been declines there also. And we've seen it over the last few years, that where there has been a shortage of sheep meat in Europe, it's created stronger prices here for Irish sheep meat. I suppose the one maybe caveat in the whole thing is maybe the trade deals that the UK has been signing with both New Zealand and Australia. So there is the potential for more product to be coming in to the UK. And they're very, they're in the last maybe 18 months, they've become more export focused. So the more cheap product that the UK imports, the more higher value product of its own, which is similar to our own in price. And we compete directly against them for the same customers in Europe. I would say the competition from the UK and the competition from the cheaper New Zealand, Australian product that comes in, and particularly goes into that food service trade, they will compete directly against us. And I suppose we are at a very high price point currently. I think the last reported sheep price I have is $8.20 a kilo, which, and I scroll back to the figures as far back as 1995, is definitely the highest that I...
So record prices.
Yeah. So that there's definitely been nothing like it.
Yeah. And what about the US market?
The US market, some of my colleagues are actually over at the American Meat Congress this week, and they've seen good opportunities for lamb. I suppose at the minute we have got market access to the US. It's sort of a 2-stage process. The country gets granted approval first, and then the individual plants then have to be approved just to USDA standards. They're fairly similar to ours. It's just a slightly different process and set up to the way the plant works. So I know some of the factories are now currently working with the department to get that, get those last couple of stages over the line. And then once that's approved, and products shipped to the market, we have a series of campaigns ready to kick off there. It's very, very hard to put a value on it, because we haven't actually had product there yet. But I suppose they do import 2/3 of everything they consume there. There's growing demand in the market. But there is a lot of New Zealand, Australian product going in there that's sort of going into like your lower end, your frozen, your that sort of thing. So where the opportunity for Irish lamb appears to be is that higher end white table food service market. So it'd be for your higher end sort of product.
Yeah. And the threat of the New Zealand, Australian, we've spoken about that a bit before in Agriland here, but the whole issue of that is quite significant, isn't it, for Irish farmers?
Of the extra product coming in, yeah, and on the beef side as well. Obviously, it's the impact of cheaper product coming into the UK, which is obviously one of our primary primary markets, and then we compete then against the UK on the export. So it does have kind of a secondary effect on us, but it just remains to be seen. I suppose you've obviously got a lot of changes in the UK as well with their changes to their single farm payment structure and things. So it's very hard to forecast where their sheep production is going to be in the next few years.
Tell me, just on the Irish consumer, how attractive is Irish lamb now in the marketplace?
Yeah, I suppose that at the minute with Easter, you'll see a lot of promotional activity going on by the major retailers. During maybe the last 12 months, inflationary impact did have an impact on our lamb consumption. But the last maybe 3 months of Kantar data would indicate there's actually been an improvement in lamb sales. And if I was to look particularly at the younger consumer as well, there's been a bit of an increase in the sales to younger consumers, especially for maybe more value added products and your easy to cook as opposed to maybe your heavier roasting joints.
Just obviously, if that demand is there, then is it important then that there is a sort of future proofing of the industry here? Because we do know that people were getting out of it. Do you think now that when you see these exceptional prices this year, that might inspire some people to say, right, okay, I'm going to sell?
Yeah, as my father says, with lamb and yos is a young man's game.
But we know some of our farmers are getting towards the 57, 58
mark at the moment. It certainly is. And no, we have had reports from some of the processors of maybe some of their boys that were lambing earlier now have decided, maybe to shift their production systems and maybe not lamb as many sheep. There is opportunity in the market, obviously now with, we've got very strong prices, we've got good demand in the markets. There is a fairly favourable outlook for our prices for the year. And, obviously you're always going to have risk, with the UK, New Zealand, Australian product and how we fit within that. But we do see good demand for product, especially if you're producing lamb that meet market spec. The market should return, so it leaves the widest range of options open for you. Should that be the domestic market where there appears to be growth, or to service that growing demand in the export markets?
And how does Bord Bia distinguish Irish lamb now? What is our unique selling point?
Yeah, as I said, if I go to Europe, their production systems are very, very different from ours. It's cereal based. A lot of the lambs are finished inside. So obviously, whenever we're going in with imagery and videos and a story to tell about our Irish grass fed, all of our lambs are outside for most of their lives. It's a very different story. And I suppose, especially when you're going with imagery of, we've got two production systems. We've got our lowland production system, and then we've got our hill lamb going for the second half of the year. So the combination of the two gives us kind of year-round supply of sheep, and that does help whenever you're explaining to customers. And when I go in with images of obviously the west coast of Donegal and Mayo,
is that a big selling point?
It does resonate with buyers in the continent, particularly because they don't really see anything like it to them. It's sheep are more or less finished inside and cereal finished, so it's a very different offering that we're giving them.
Does that work in the US market then too?
The US, it shows great potential. If we can get in there, obviously a lot of Americans resonate with Irish and they think of Ireland, they think of sheep, so there is great opportunity for us to grow value and volume of sales there once we can get product into that market.
What's the biggest challenge in 2024 do you see here? Is it supply?
Yeah, it'll just be balancing that supply and demand. Obviously we're going to have decline in production in Europe, so that should keep a floor under demand. And I suppose it's just about having a stable supply of sheep. Whenever you're dealing with customers in Europe, they want consistent supply across a 52-week year. So it's about keeping that. I suppose another key challenge is that sheep meat is perceived as a product for older consumers, and that has been the focus of Bord Bia and other bodies across Europe to try and encourage more younger consumers into the category. So, and that will be the focus of our campaigns moving forward.
And is that, I was going to say to you, is that working? Are you seeing good traction in that?
Yeah, if I look, Kantar looks at the retail sales out of all the major retailers, and there's definitely been growth. In the last maybe 6 months, we've moved towards using more digital, more online, using influencers and recipes that target younger consumers specifically. And it's been the same for some of the other promotional bodies. And if I look at the Kantar sales data, there's been an improvement now off a low base, but there's been an improvement in sales to your younger consumers.
Obviously with sheep farmers, we have been covering over the last few years how difficult the conditions have been. We have had very wet conditions here over the last few months. It's a difficult industry. It's a difficult sector to be in, isn't it?
It is, and I suppose, as we touched on, because the sheep spend so much time outside as well. And it is, and I suppose we've seen a fair few farmers shift to the organic model as well. I suppose that's to be factored in as well. No, it is a challenging market to be in. But I suppose the focus should be on producing an animal that the customer ultimately wants. So if you can produce an animal, should that be on the hill or in lowland, that meets the specification.
It's got to be all rounded.
Seems to be if you can produce someone between that 18, 22 kilos, you're leaving the widest range of options open to you in terms of suitable market, and obviously then those are the top sort of lambs that the processors need and want.
This has been a big focus on the move by some farmers into organic. Is that delivering on price for them?
Yeah, there is a 15% premium for organic lambs. So over whatever the quoted price is, that it's 15% on top of that. Because we haven't seen, I suppose, we've seen the first big wave of farmers coming into organic, and they're currently in conversion. So in 2 years, 3 years time now, whenever they all come in, we will have organic lamb to sell. There has been some positive signals from Europe, from customers for European lamb. So it's
there's a price premium there, though, isn't there? There
is the price premium. Sure, it's 15% above the conventional, and it tends to be the same then when you go to market.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities? If you're a sheep farmer today and you're thinking, okay, what am I going to do in the future here? What are you saying to them? Where's the biggest opportunities coming?
Yeah, well, I suppose the sheep producers now intend to be on maybe land that wasn't suitable for other sort of dairy in particular. So the biggest opportunity to me, I suppose, is in producing a lamb that's suitable. Obviously, then you've got the organic, which is attractive because of your higher payments and stuff. But it's just about finding the right balance in terms of increasing your farm income or maintaining the highest possible income. And should that be organic, or should that not be organic and drive up your number of ewes or number of lambs produced per ewe? Every farmer sort of has to make his own decision as to where the most profitable path forward lies.
Just going to come back and talk about prices, because that's something that our audience is always very interested in. Do you see a maximum ceiling at all? I know you don't like to talk prices, but do you see that we're going to go much higher?
I suppose the problem is that once lamb on a supermarket shelf tends to be the most premium of prices anyway, and once you go beyond a particular point, people start switching into other categories, and it is very hard once someone switches out of a category. So say that be from lamb to beef, it's very hard to get them to switch back. So while high prices are to be welcome for farmers, it does leave it a wee bit more difficult to sell it on the other side. It's a different category from beef as well, because from beef, if prices get very strong, you switch from your steak to your lower value cuts.
You can trade down slightly.
Exactly, within the category. Whereas with lamb,
you switch out, do you?
Switch out, and it's very hard to get them to come back into it. So that's why I suppose a lot of our focus and campaigns is looking at the versatility and highlighting lamb as a midweek meal to try and drive those higher volume sales and particularly target those younger consumers.
Yeah. And do you see a particular opportunity for a particular sector of the market? Do you see that there's any sector of the market that's stronger than others?
No, I wouldn't say in particular. I suppose obviously the export market, we consume about 15% of our lamb domestically. And then the other 85% is exported. Like Europe in particular is obviously the highest paying, strongest market, and that's going to be continued to be the focus of a lot of the exporters' attention, and then obviously our promotional activity to go along with that is going to be the focus. There's obviously very strong demand in Switzerland, and then obviously we have the opportunity to get into the likes of the US and China once the market access issues are sorted out. So those, for different reasons, offer opportunity. China from a carcass balance sort of opportunity to add value to bits that maybe aren't valued in the EU market, and then the US for that higher value sort of end of things.
And would you be generally optimistic about that?
Yeah, we're moving into a situation where we've got, a growing ethnic demand for sheep meat. We've got fallen declines in production across Europe. It's our key market. There's always going to be risks there from our competitors and, from imported product, but I would be generally optimistic for the sheep trade for the year.
That's all we have time for today, and I'd like to thank Seamus McMenamin, Sector Manager for Sheep Meat and Livestock with Bord Bia, for joining us here at Agriland today. And you can catch up with all the latest stories on www.agriland.ie.